Dobar je. Pa mislim da možemo da počnemo jer smo već kasnimo. Govorit ću na engleskom, tako lakše za mene i možda moj engleski malo bolji nego hrvatski, tako da počnemo. Dobrodošli na ovaj talk. Ovo vam je Spring Boot, kako upotrebimo Spring Boot u aplikacijama na Red Hat middleware stacku. Onda sad engleski. Just quick agenda, just what it is, what's Red Hat middleware, what's Spring Boot, what's OpenShift, what's Keycloak, what's Fabricate, some of the stuff that we're going to use. C is like cloud enablement and Obsidian. I'll just mention what they are. And I'll try to show 2 demos if there's time. Middleware, of course, you probably know the Red Hat middleware. I think we now call it Red Hat middleware JBoss or something like a long name, but it's still like formally known as JBoss. It can still be called this way, so people know about it. We had to change, of course, the names because probably people mostly added JBoss with JBoss Application Server, which was also renamed to Wildfly just to make it more explicit, like a change, so it's just an application server. And of course, with all the projects that we have around Red Hat middleware or JBoss middleware, the name was obvious. Like I mentioned, it's like plenty of open source projects, which most of them get turned into products. So you get all the QA behind it, tested, signed with the security stuff and so on. Just to name a few, the stuff that we're going to use, and we already heard about it, is Keycloak. I'm going to also show Artemis, which is like a joint venture of ActiveMQ and HornetQ. Like ActiveMQ came from Apache, HornetQ was our JMS or MQ solution, and now they joined forces into Artemis. Of course, Wildfly, Drules, and plenty more. I think we have like around 100 open source projects. Just to mention what is Spring Boot, you probably know it if you're using it, or if you didn't, it's like a flat class path runtime. It uses extensively Spring framework usage. All the stuff that you know before from using Spring Framework, it's useful here and even more. Of course, it's ideal for microservices with as easy as it is with flat class paths, right? But you still have to know what to put on the class path. If you have 2 similar libraries with different versions, then you might get into problems, most probably into problems. And of course, it tries to do a lot of things out of the box, like dependency discovery and integration. You have those configuration beans that get turned into real beans, real services, and so on. It's mostly really, it's all about like ease of development and ease of running the stuff. You just put proper dependencies on the class path, and it should find them, and it should start them up, boot them up, and so on. So, like I said, ideal for microservices. OpenShift, Marco, is like 2 Marcos today. So Marco already talked about it, like 3 talks before, getting more extensively into the OpenShift and Kubernetes and so on. Just to say, it's like of course it's Red Hat's platform as a service. It's easy to set up. That's why it's ideal for on-premise. I guess some of you use it. As Marco mentioned, we're extending Kubernetes, just building on top of it. This is our 3rd version of trying to implement something as a PaaS. Previously, we had similar concepts, but of course, riding on the success of Kubernetes is much easier and much more popular and so on. What we also do is, Red Hat is 2nd biggest contributor to Kubernetes. The features that we find in OpenShift, if they make sense to be as generic, we do upstream them in Kubernetes as well. As Marco mentioned, it has nice REST API, and around that REST API is like a cool command line interface and cool user interface. Keycloak, the other Marco talked about it, just also like 2 talks before. It's of course Keycloak. We turned Keycloak into a product called Red Hat SSO. It's all about authentication, authorization, and single sign-on. And if you do any kind of security, just try to delegate it to Keycloak or Red Hat SSO. As Marco mentioned, doing security is tricky. It has all those small details You probably, even if you know all about it, you're still probably going to miss some small detail. And the team behind Keycloak and Red Hat SSO probably thought about it, and they solved it, and so on. So if you have any kind of security, I don't know, like doing an open source projects using open source, try Keycloak. Fabricate, it's something that came out of when Red Hat bought Fuse Software, just Fuse. They're doing a bunch of interesting stuff on top of OpenShift, Kubernetes, and so on. One of the things, I'm just mentioning all these things because we're going to use them later on in the demos, and just probably just to explain what they are, what they do, so it's just not something completely new. Like I said, they're doing a bunch of Fabricate. It came out of Fuse software, like a team that Red Hat bought a couple of years ago, and they're still mostly on their own, but they're of course integrated into various pieces of Red Hat middleware, and they're doing most of the stuff on top of, like I said, OpenShift, Kubernetes, and microservices, and so on. And of course, one of the things, if you're looking into, I don't know, OpenShift or Kubernetes Java client, that's the way to go. At least, even inside Red Hat, we had 2 or 3 different projects doing the same stuff, and then we finally came to our senses and unified it all, and chose Fabricate's Java client. There's like a nice Fluent API. Just type it, of course, like client, do I don't know, namespace, list, blah blah. It's just adding like a really nice Fluent API, and they're doing a lot of new releases. If you wherever find a bug, you just get a new release. So the version number is insanely big. The other thing is what they came off as like previous Fabricate Maven plugin, which I think it did all those different things on top of Camel, some of the stuff. This is now, it still uses, I think, the same name, but it's completely different plugin. It's based around, again, OpenShift and Kubernetes to help you deploy your app on top of either Kubernetes or OpenShift. What I have is like versus git push plus source to image. I don't know if you're listening to Marcus talk, the Luksha's talk about OpenShift. OpenShift, of course, has integration. It's more than Kubernetes. It also has the build process built into it. And if you do, for example, if you properly configure it and you do a git push on your changes, it will, and you have a hook, it will be notified, and it will create a new image, Docker image for your app, and it will deploy it on OpenShift. Just out of the box, you don't have to do anything. But of course, then you're depending on what kind of stuff is supported by OpenShift directly. So you're not able to touch what's the stuff that's on OpenShift. Of course, you have, as Marco mentioned, you have things that it recognizes different environments. If it finds POM XML, okay, it knows, oh, this is like Maven-based. I'm going to do a Maven-based build S to I. If it has something different, but of course, you're sort of limited to what OpenShift provides. In the case of Maven, in case of Fabricate Maven plugin, of course, you're on your own. Everything is done locally for you. And you can even add some of the stuff. For example, it builds an image stream of it does your project. It builds of course, it's Maven-based now because you have a Maven plugin. It builds a tar ball, right? And then it sort of pushes us into a build S2I process on top of OpenShift, where it sort of detects what kind of app it is, right? If it finds, okay, it's like a Spring Boot app, it will know that it needs to do like a Java S2I. Also similar for Swarm, Wildfire Swarm, or for Vertex and so on. If it finds, oh, there's like a web app, and if you find, okay, I found some Wildfly specific descriptors and so on, it will generate a image or like an image stream that will be based on top of Wildfly. In our case, actually, it's built on the top of EAP, which is a product of Wildfly. If it finds something from Tomcat, it will build on top of Tomcat product and so on, right? But you can even do your own. You can build your own plugins into the detection, and it will create, of course, proper. Of course, still again, you need to have a proper builder image inside OpenShift. But you can push that image inside, and plus you can create your own environment detection, configuration, and so on, and so it's more pluggable. Okay, now we have the image of our application out there, but that's of course that's not enough for OpenShift or Kubernetes. You also need to configure or describe your application in the case of objects for OpenShift or I don't know templates and so on, right? I'll show that in the example itself. But what it does, the plugin does, it's mostly if you just have your app, it will know what kind of thing you need. It will generate it out of the box. It will generate automatically the resources that you need. For example, for OpenShift, if you want to access your application from outside, it needs a route. A route needs a service needs a pod. And this is all OpenShift or Kubernetes terminology. Marco, what in the case of Kubernetes, what's instead of route? Ingress? Okay, Kubernetes has different things, but the plugin recognizes if you want to go against Kubernetes or either OpenShift. It does both. So if it finds, okay, you're going against OpenShift, it will create OpenShift objects. If it goes against Kubernetes, it will create OpenShift Kubernetes objects. And it also it knows how to merge some of the resources. That's what we're doing in my demo. If you have certain resources already, it will use those, plus enrich them or merge them with their own defaults that it adds on top of it, right? Like I said, it creates templates or just separate objects if you need. And it also handles the whole life cycle. Just do Maven, fabricate, deploy, or start, or stop, or undeploy, something like that. We'll just do the deploy, as you'll see in the demo. From all this, I don't know, like we're talking about middleware and all these different things, OpenShift and so on. Inside Red Hat, we recognize this. For example, we had a bunch of projects or even products doing integration into OpenShift. And of course, everybody was doing similar things, but a bit differently. Some of them just refused to do it and so on. So we created a team inside called Cloud Enablement, just specifically people doing like Marco and me, doing integration of products on top of OpenShift, or later on it's going to be projects. It's of course, each of the projects, it needs some sort of like a small custom extensions or plugins into the code itself. For example, the EAP server doesn't just run out of the box and as a cluster on top of OpenShift. It needs some small tweaks into the code, like an extension. We don't actually change the code, we extend it, because, for example, Wildfly has those extensions properly, has those ways of plugging in things to be extendable. We create Docker images, and of course we create proper application templates, as Mark already showed in his talk. The Obsidian, again, it's a different with all these microservices things going on. Like we have our own Wildfire Swarm, we have Vertex for the reactive programming. Of course, we cannot just ignore Spring Boot, and there's another different similar things coming along. We also, of course, need to integrate them with all the products that we have, all the projects and so on. I'll show it how we do it for the Keycloak on Spring Boot, or for something like for Artemis. The interesting thing is that it's actually not that hard. Of course, it's, as I mentioned, even Spring Boot and Swarm, they all play on they all do it similarly. They find dependencies and they integrate them. They provide proper hooks on which you integrate those plugins or all extensions, and those, and then the runtimes itself, like Spring Boot and Swarm, and they just discover it on the class path and pick it up and integrate it into it, and it works. The idea here is, of course, they're all open source projects. You can develop those dependencies, those integrations on your own. For example, when I was looking into Spring Boot, we found most of the, of course, integrations were already there. For example, any of our major projects or products that we looked into it, there was already a plugin, already a dependency or adapter for that stuff. Or similar for Swarm, of course, we need to do it on our own because it's like a younger project and so on. Similar for Vertex and so on. We try to expose these integrations and so on for the people to use it and to know how to use it through quick starts. And to simplify all of that, it's like a project generator. Project generator, you just go and click which environment you want to use, and what kind of technologies or dependencies you want to have. For example, you would click, in our case, you would click, I want to use Spring Boot with Keycloak and I don't know, JPA, something like that, click, 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 and the generator will generate you a zip, which you download, unpack, and you have a quick start with all the, like a running quick start, you can just run the quick start. But of course, in your case, you would modify, you would copy, paste, or delete, or just rename some of the stuff, and continue from there on. That's the project generator. Let me just now move to the, hopefully I don't have it prepared as both Marcos did. I'll try to run it here and keeping my fingers crossed. Just first of all, this is the. Okay, just show you. Like for example, this is that's the second one. This is the project which uses Spring Boot and it deploys and uses Red Hat SSO and deploys it all on OpenShift, right? As I mentioned, this is from the app itself. As you can see, the app itself is like 3 classes. It's like this is just to boot the app. Then I have a simple REST controller with, I don't know, the message gets injected from here. This is the request mapping. It's like greeting, and just a greeting class. It's like a data transfer object, right? Pretty simple. The most of the stuff, of course, it's hidden here. Let me just close this. It's hidden in the dependency, which is, of course, like the Spring Boot parent starter, the web, of course. Then I'm using Tomcat. Then I, of course, need to put the Tomcat artifacts on top of it. And this is all that's required from the, okay, this is the 3 artifacts, like the SPI for Keycloak, the Tomcat adapter, and of course the Spring Boot adapter. And that's it. There's, of course, in the code, I'm not in the code itself, there's no dependency, direct dependency, or either Tomcat or either Keycloak, and so on. Of course, the application properties, here do have Keycloak specific stuff, right? It's like a realm and so on. I'm using all these curly braces, right, with the name. This gets picked up. It first looks into the system environment, or I don't know in which order. Either it looks in system property. If it doesn't find it in the system property, it looks into the system in the environment variables, changing dots into underscores and doing uppercase and so on. And that's important because that's the way you sort of push like simple configuration into your app, right? Let's look now what I want to mention. This is the OpenShift specific stuff. Like I said, we need the route. And just now, the route goes to the secured Spring Boot REST service. As this is like I said, there's no. As you can see, there's no service, right? Because the Fabricate Maven plugin will do the service, the proper service by default. It will, there's like a Spring Boot application. By default, the Spring Boot web stuff uses 8080 port, and it will create a service for me out of the box. And this route will pick up on that service. Of course, for the deployment configuration, deployment config, I need a bit more because I need some of those, like I said, I need the environment's SSO URL, which this is like an important stuff. This is the stuff, right? This SSO URL goes against this environment variable. And this environment variable, it will be picked up from the parameters from the template and so on. Let me just go forward. And this is a template. In the template itself, I'm just typing in all the parameters that I need. This is, of course, this I need to show this and connect it to the where my SSO server is going to run. This is, I mean, it's a bit of a problem because it's dynamically created and so on, but you need to first create the project on OpenShift. But luckily, the URLs are deterministic, right? So that's this. This is the app, and I have in the SSO itself. In the SSO itself, there's no actual Java code or nothing. It's just a bunch of OpenShift descriptors from the routes, from the secrets, and so on. And this all gets created. It all gets mashed into. Let me just deploy this. I first need to. I'm building the application and pushing the application into the image stream. So it registers my image. Like you can see, like it's using OpenShift, building with strategy S2I, and it knows, it found its Spring Boot, right? This is all being found out by the plugin itself. And now it's building it. Now it's created the tarball and it's pushing it into the OpenShift, into the Docker registry, right? And by proper names, by default names, if you don't touch anything, it will create the default names and it will all match. If you're doing any kind of changes to, I don't know, services and services selectors or labels and so on, be careful, because that can easily bite you, and then you're looking like crazy. Why it doesn't find my pod? Why it doesn't route? Why it doesn't connect the route to the service or service to the pod? And so it can get quite ugly, right? Okay, here. I can just change it back. It created, if you can go here, you can see the stuff that it generated. You can see it here, right? Meta-inf, fabricate. And these are all the like Kubernetes templates, Kubernetes OpenShift, and OpenShift YAML template. If you want to, that's the stuff that gets later on used and deployed on OpenShift. Let's go into SSO now. Just deploy it on all OpenShift. This is going to be a bit quicker. Now it's taking all those OpenShift resources, OpenShift objects, and it's pushing them into either from the app, from an SSO, because my SSO had a dependency on the app, and it knows how to merge the both resources, OpenShift from the app and from the SSO. Okay, so it should be good. So it should here. This is the OpenShift like online. This is what you can also like get if you apply to it, and it get 30 days free stuff, and then of course you can reapply it every 30 days. For what the official, if you want something more, I'm not the right person to ask. So you probably need to go openshift.com and now, of course, similar to what the Oracle guys were showing before. It takes a while to boot up everything, but it will show, of course, it will show like one pod, another. Like we have, this is of course the secure SSO, so it uses SSL underneath. Okay, this one's already running, and this one's running as well. This is the Spring Boot application, of course, and this goes to again to the same deployment as the SSO deployment, right? Let me just open this. Admin. I need to change. The thing is that we still have a small bug in this. Let me just whoop. Came up. Now I'm not gonna find it. I mean, just have 1 minute. Okay, let me just show you another demo. This one, then of course, I changed it, configured Keycloak. If I went back to the URL of the application /greeting, it will redirect me to the Keycloak. I will, of course, it will kick in the Keycloak adapter will kick in. It will redirect me to Keycloak. I will type in the username and password from what I configured previously in the Keycloak, and it will redirect me back to my greeting app, and it will serve me that like hello greeting stuff, right? And just a quick, for example, just to show how easy is this, for the Artemis, this is like a test app just to boot the application. We have the controller. You just say like a REST controller, so then I can just, what I want to do is here is send something on the web, and then I have this JMS template wired. As you can see, like there's just like a plain JMS template. It doesn't have anything to do with Artemis or whatever the explicit JMS implementation, and it just sends this to the full queue, right? And this is the listener, which listens to the full queue and just puts out the message. And all I need to do is to integrate this with Artemis is this piece of information. Just putting in boot Artemis. This is, as you can see, this is already part of the Spring Boot project. Somebody already contributed the Artemis integration. Put this on the class path, it will find it. And if you're able to, if I had the time to run it, I could just easily went here. It's like too small. Nope. Swarm. Oh, this would be it. I would run Artemis, right? That will connect to it, and then in Artemis itself, you have sort of, where is, this is the run. Oh, it has a means of producing sort of test stuff, and you can see like I would produce to my few queue one message with, I don't know, text size as big as this, 5 threads and so on in verbose, and it would pick it up, and my Spring Boot application listener would pick it up and it would display it. So that's it, right? Okay. I mean, we have probably 2 questions. If you have any questions, I'll be around and you can ask me. Možete me pitati slobodno, tako da. Ok, hvala.